Probably the greatest scientist that ever lived, people would declare, is Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton discovered the laws of universal gravitation. He's the one who mathematically would predict what a person would weigh on the earth, and then what he'd weigh on the moon, and so forth. He had discovered the 3 laws of motions, and if you've studied physics, you know about that. He studied light and color. He was the inventor of the first telescope. But what a lot of people don't realize is science was not his first love. He spent more time studying the Bible than he did investigating nature. And he wrote a number of gospel tracts and at least 2 books, The Prophecies of Daniel and The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms. So the man was a Bible believer and also probably the greatest scientist ever lived. Let me hurry through some others. Michael Faraday, thought to be the greatest of the experimental physicists. He invented the transformer, electric motor, electric generator, discovered the laws of electrolysis, and if you've ever done anything with electroplating, you'd know about the units of the Faraday. He discovered benzene, but he also was an ardent student of the Scriptures. His Bible contained nearly 3,000 annotations, carefully written notes in the margin of how he studied the Bible. And we could go on, and I'm just going to hurry on. You've heard of Samuel Morse. Now this you would know about. It's the great signal, the SOS, but what a lot of people don't realize is the very first message that he sent over the telegraph was what God hath wrought, from Numbers 23:23. William Ramsay, who's responsible for the discovery of most of what are called noble gases, used to be called inert gases, was also a Bible. So what I'm trying to say is there are thousands of scientists, not only in the past, but also today, who believe in the Bible, and you can get some lists of these on the website and some of these organizations. And I just want to say what Julian Huxley said about the fact that no serious scientist would deny the fact that evolution has occurred is a flat-out lie. Many scientists believe it. Now let's talk about some evolutionists. Let's see, we talked about the benefits of science and the benefits of true scientists. Let's talk about Lamarck, for example. Lamarck, he had the idea, the evolutionary idea, that the formation of a new organ was a result of a new need. In other words, if a worm felt it needed an eye bad enough, he'd wish it bad enough, and then he'd eventually get an eye. He also had his theory, which he's best known for, is the inheritance of acquired characteristics. It's the idea that if you go and get suntan, then your children would have a suntan. Or if you were in the Far East and the sun, the land of the rising sun, and you squinted, then your eyes would have squinty eyes. And that's where they accounted for some of these, what sometimes called racial characteristics. Well, I want to say both of these ideas were unacceptable. This idea of inheriting acquired characteristics, like if a blacksmith developed big muscles, that his children would have muscles, that's not true. The children's got to develop exercise too if they want the muscles. He demonstrated that by taking a pair of mice, cutting off their tails, bred them, the little mice had tails. Bred them, the little mice had tails. He had 22 generations of mice, they still had tails before he quit his experiment. So you don't inherit acquired characteristics. Let's talk about Charles Darwin. I've already mentioned that his book, of course, is what really has caused so many people to err, but he was certainly a racist, and his idea of the survival of the fittest, that just kind of kill and rule and come to the top type idea, is certainly not a good idea. And by the way, Charles Darwin has never performed any experiment. He certainly wasn't a scientist. Okay, Ernest Haeckel, we've already talked about him speculating the human embryo passing through the evolutionary stages in youth. And I just want to say, this man wasn't even honest. Many of his drawings were intentionally changed. For example, the top row shows what he showed the embryos were like. The bottom row are actual pictures of what the embryos of this various creature was like. And then let's get to Julian Huxley, who was one of the principal architects of world humanism. And his humanist aim was to eliminate national sovereignty in order to achieve a new world order. And he makes statements like this: operationally, God is beginning to resemble not a ruler, but the last fading smile of a cosmic Cheshire cat. I mean, that's blasphemy. And I might just mention that I have on my table in the back a debate I had with the chairman of the board of the Atheists of Florida, and I was at the University of South Florida, and I determined when I presented my presentation in 30 minutes, I didn't mention God, I didn't mention the Bible, I didn't mention church. I simply showed evolution is not scientific, contradicts scientific laws, not mathematically probable. The fellow I debated, the very first statement he said, he was the chairman of the board of the Atheists of Florida, the very first statement he said, I was formerly a Pentecostal preacher. He said it 5 times in his thing. And then in the sessions he said, then I started believing in evolution, and he held up a bumper stick. The next step after evolutionism is atheism. He holds up this bumper sticker and says, I'm proud to be an atheist. Well, that's what the result of evolution. Okay, let's talk about the laws of science. I'm just going to briefly mention this. I'm going to give you 3 scientific laws: observable, repeatable, subject to experimentation. So life can only come from other life. Evolutionists propose that life came from non-life. Non-living particles somehow combined to form amino acids and proteins and living cells. This has never been observed, never been repeated, never verified. It's not scientific. Life comes from life. Life does not come from non-life. Second law, as I mentioned, that's what we call the law of kinds, the biblical law. It's a scientific law. Like begets like. Rabbits produce rabbits. Pear trees produce pears, and so forth. Humans have humans. It doesn't go from one kind to another. But evolutionists try to say that, dinosaurs became birds and so forth. That's contradictory to what we actually observe. Science, true science, reveals that. A third law is that systems left to themselves go to a condition of greater randomness, probability, or disorder. If I had some pickup sticks here, and I dropped those pickup sticks, they would scatter. It happens every single time. Things left to themselves go to a condition of greater disorder. That's what we observe scientifically. Everything goes from order to disorder, unless there's intelligence and energy. Thank God we know who that great intelligence was, and we know where the energy came from. Praise God. But evolution has the idea that just by the properties of matter, disordered particles somehow ran themselves into ordered life. That's like getting a puzzle with 1,000 parts. Wasn't that neat, that object that Brother Mooney had? I wish I had a bigger fan yet here. And I had a box of puzzle parts, 1,000 parts. I shook them all up so they were all breaking up. I had a great fan, and I blew those pieces up against the screen, and they formed the completed puzzle. Well, that will never happen, will it? Even if you had the completed puzzle and put up the fan, they would scatter. It would show the second law of thermodynamics. It's true. Okay, I have said this before, but no volcanic eruption, no earthquake, no atomic bomb has ever produced a skyscraper. The idea that billions of years ago a kernel of energy, ordered energy, exploded with a big bang and produced an orderly universe is non-scientific. I'm going to go further. Brother Mooney, I've known a word most of my life, but didn't realize it was in the dictionary. It's the word called hogwash. It's in the dictionary. It's not a curse word, but the Big Bang theory is hogwash. The whole theory of evolution is hogwash. And yet, the American public has been brainwashed in the idea you can teach evolution in a school because it's science. It's not science. It's falsely called science. And I'm going to keep on going on this. We're talking about science versus evolution. Okay. Now, how about the fossil record? That's often used by evolutionists to try to claim that they have evidence, finding this fossil as evidence of evolution. Well, let's talk about the for going from a single-celled organism to a complex invertebrate like a trilobite. No single intermediate between them. No intermediates whatsoever. No transitional form between fish and amphibians. If evolution was true and a fish evolved into amphibian, something should have like a quarter leg and three-quarter fin, or half fin, half leg, and so forth. You don't find that in the fossil record. No intermediate stages to the fin and foot. And of course, the fish has different structure as far as the pelvic bone compared to an amphibian, a fish which is designed to swim, an amphibian which needs a structure in order to walk. Okay, let's move on to that. Okay, how about reptiles and mammals? Well, you have a single bone in your lower jaw. A reptile is supposed to evolve into a mammal. A reptile has 6 bones in each side.